Joining me right now is Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for China Strategy and the author of The 100-Year Marathon, which is a must-read book. Michael Pillsbury back with us. Michael, good to see you this morning. What do you make of that? Jake Sullivan's commentary about the militaries of both nations talking with one another, and what are you expecting from this meeting?
Well, what I'm expecting from the meeting is to see two different versions of what's happening. Yeah. The Chinese version is that you should invest in China. They're having a whole bunch of parties, dinners, inviting Silicon Valley high-tech titans. For China, this is a please come invest in China summit. It's very different for the Biden administration. They are quite aware of the Biden crime family allegations and the subpoena. So they're trying to show how tough Biden is. That's why you saw Jake Sullivan just now in that clip talk about the need for military contacts. The Chinese have already signaled a few days ago that they're willing to reestablish a kind of military contact, Maria, where the groups from two sides get together and talk. What they're not willing to do is the most important thing. The Chinese are not willing to reestablish the actual hotline in which an incident that could provoke a war could be immediately discussed within a few minutes. So we'll be watching that. The most important thing, of course, is will China stop its military intimidation campaign every day of dozens of jet fighters and ships and bombers going around Taiwan. We'll be able to see immediately if that stops or not. My hunch is it will not stop, that this summit will be a failure. But I hate to be negative in advance. But as I say, the Chinese want this to become invest in China as their message.
Yeah, I think that's right in terms of investing in China. But, you know, I mean, of the 26 publicly traded Chinese companies that are supplying weapons to Tehran and providing vital support to Iran's oil and other industries, 23 of those companies are included in the investment products of U.S. asset managers. Mm-hmm. So already you've got all these companies that are tied to China right there in ETFs and index providers like BlackRock and Vanguard, basically having U.S. investors fund the military of the U.S.'s #1 adversary.
That's exactly right. I was in China 2 weeks ago, Maria, at a conference of a lot of 50 think tanks from around the world. One of the things I noticed is how panicked, how scared the Chinese are that the American Congress is going to do something about all this foreign investment going into China. From the Chinese point of view, the good news is nothing has passed. A very weak measure came out of the House Financial Services Committee that companies don't even have to report the investments they're making in China. So you and I know this is like a 5-year issue. We've known about American investment going into high-tech sectors in China that help their military. The Congress itself has done zero about it. What China thinks is at stake with this summit with Biden, they've got to continue to have our Congress stay asleep on trying to block investment in China and many other things. Heritage Foundation put out a list of 50 measures Congress should take. So far, 0 have actually passed. You've got many members of the House and Senate will come on Fox, say, I introduced a farmlands bill, this morning, and then actually nothing happens. So this is becoming a disaster from our side. And the Chinese, they're not stupid. They've noticed the Congress simply will not act yet. And their idea is if they can keep Congress complacent about China another few years, they're going to surpass us and their 100-year marathon will be over. I'm afraid of the outcome myself. Chinese confidence is very high, Maria.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I wish we could pay more attention to the outcome of the summit. Will China really restrain Putin in the Ukraine? Will China cut back its purchases of oil that funds Iranian terror around the world? There's a kind of long, specific list of things we could see happen if this was a successful summit. My forecast is it will be successful only for China, not for the Biden administration. I hope I'm wrong, but that's how it looks to me.
You make a very good point, and now I understand why the U.S. keeps sending people to go kiss the ring of Xi Jinping and visit China, all of those cabinet members that went, because China has cut off communications. And the military is not speaking with each other is probably dangerous. Yes. I just want to say this, that Senator Rick Scott in Florida is expected to introduce a bill, possibly this week, prohibiting U.S. investor holdings of unregulated, CCP-controlled Chinese A shares. There are nearly 4,000 A share companies in the investment portfolios. So that's there are some people in Congress who are trying to stop this. But look, you know that the leadership comes from the top. I mean, you know, and Joe Biden, we don't know what Xi Jinping has on Joe Biden. And, you know, but this is the whole reason that Xi Jinping is going to be the guest of honor at a dinner with top U.S. executives in San Francisco. The New York Times is reporting that tickets to the dinner and the reception hosted by the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations and the U.S.-China Business Council cost $2,000 each. For $40,000, companies can purchase 8 seats at a table plus 1 seat at Mr. Xi's table. Michael, all of this pomp and circumstance is really ignoring the issues that you're talking about, and the issues of you know, the bullying coming from China on America, or the cover-up of COVID, or the intellectual property theft. What do you believe the U.S. should be doing to stop this aggression?
Well, one specific thing you just mentioned, I heard from Roger Robinson that he was going to get Senator Rick Scott to introduce this. I begged Roger, get another 30 or 40 senators to do this. Don't let Senator Scott go alone and then have nothing happen. That's what happened with Joni Ernst and the Farmlands bill. She was the only sponsor, and so nothing happened. In terms of the larger picture, what Biden ought to be judged on is, can he get China's military intimidation campaign toward Taiwan? Can he get that to stop immediately? But I think they won't, because China wants to influence the elections in Taiwan in January and make sure the pro-independence candidate doesn't win. Right now, he's ahead. So there's a lot at stake here for China, but they're trying to show the world we have America on our side. We have America under control. You know, the Americans are going to invest in China, so the rest of the world better come with us as well. There's a bit of a threat to what China's doing in San Francisco. Look, we've got the Americans to invest in us. So I pray Rick Scott will have 25 or 30 co-sponsors when he introduces the legislation. It's extremely important to cut off American investment in the high-tech sectors in China.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Brown, expressed doubt that China will invade Taiwan. He told reporters in Tokyo last week he doesn't think Xi wants to take Taiwan by force, and instead will try other ways to do this, Michael. We all know how that played out in Hong Kong. You know, they didn't just go in and take over Hong Kong. They did it in a soft way, coming out with new rules, and then started throwing freedom fighters in jail because they weren't following all their new rules.
I hope you've seen this announcement Friday from the Chinese. It's highly embarrassing for the Biden administration. They listed about 15 things that the Biden team has promised in order to get this summit in San Francisco. One of them is not seeking confrontation over Taiwan, not seeking a new Cold War. It's quite a long list of what these cabinet secretaries apparently have been saying in secret when they went to Beijing. And here the Chinese release what these promises are from the Biden team. It's quite stunning to read. It's in a way, it's the Chinese seeking to embarrass Biden in advance of the summit by saying, look at all these promises you've made that you will not cause any trouble for the rise of China. It's quite an extraordinary article. It's the official People's Daily magazine of China.
That is incredible. And you're right. That is a way of embarrassing Joe Biden and putting him on the spot to make sure he keeps the quote unquote promises, which he should not have been making in the first place.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
I know the Chinese pretty well. I was surprised that they did this. That they did this to undermine him on the eve of the summit. It's kind of a provocation of Biden.
They undermined the U.S. while John Kerry was still there. They said nobody's going to tell us what to do with climate. Right? They undermined Janet Yellen while she was there. They fed her psychedelic mushrooms. I'm not surprised. That's what they're doing. They're undermining. And this meeting will be the same. I'm sorry to say I agree with you. Michael, thank you very much. Good to see you this morning, sir.